all the time. Powered by Arkansas, for Arkansas. The John Nabors Show is live from the Natty State Sports Studios.
And welcome into the John Nabors Show here live from Natty State Sports Studios. Appreciate each and every one of you listening in and watching in on this beautiful day here in the great state of Arkansas. I am your host, John Nabors, and appreciate each and every one of you for making us a part of your afternoon this afternoon. Hope everybody's having a wonderful Tuesday. Feels like it's Wednesday for some reason, but it is only a Tuesday, and we're going to have a lot of things to discuss today. We're going to talk a lot of basketball. Aaron Torres of Fox Sports Radio is going to be joining us as he has some interesting takes, not only on the job that Cal has done so far in putting together the team, but why he's not just yet sold on Arkansas being a top 10 team, even though they have one of the more talented 9 players on their roster. But we'll get into that. We'll have some awards to hand out as Razorback Baseball continues to add some of those. But I wanted to start a little bit with football because Arkansas was able to get a couple of commitments here recently on the football side of things. And anytime that you're able to add in, players that can just add depth and help out, it's always a really big, nice, important thing. So the latest has been Georgia 3-star defensive lineman Caleb Bell. And Caleb Bell is committed to Arkansas, part of the 2025 class. This is all according to 24/7 Sports. He's 6'3", 270 pounds, and he was less than 2 weeks removed from his official visit with the University of Arkansas. He said, quote, the campus really and the team were the highlights of the official visit. I could see myself being here. It's very likable and enjoyable at Arkansas. He said, seeing defensive line coach Deke Adams and his players and see how much they interact with him, see how much they respect him, it means a lot. The vibe down here stands out because there's not really any pro teams in Arkansas. There's a lot of passionate people here and obviously passionate about their team. It's a lot of fun being down here. Looks like he was also taking an official visit to NC State. That was the only other one that he ended up doing an official visit with. And Mississippi State was also in the mix, but he decided to go to Arkansas. Grades out as an 88 and also slots him in at the number 63 player in the state of Georgia, as well as a top 60 among defensive linemen in the country. As a high 3-star, he's 2 points away from being a 4-star. So, whatever that means, the high 4-star, everything like that. It's a nice little get for Arkansas whenever you see that. So they continue to add players and trying to make it work where we talked, I guess, last week, maybe 2 weeks ago. It's hard to keep up with it. But talked a bit about the side of recruiting where if you're a Razorback fan, you're looking at what the future is going to look like. And with Sam Pittman this year and the uncertainty of the situation where we know this is a make or break year for Sam Pittman, has to do really well. And with the transfer portal being such an emphasis nowadays, it's really tough to be like, okay, so with high school recruiting, yes, you want to be great at it. Yes, you want to add players into it. But if you don't, it's not the end of the world. If you don't have just an elite level of players, but you're able to do, that's the other side of the coin, but you're able to also do really well in the transfer portal, it's not as big of a deal. But right now, Arkansas, where it stands, and again, this is according to 24/7 Sports, they are the 32nd overall ranked recruiting class in the country. They have 13 commits, and at least as of right now, none of them are at the 4-star range, although you do have 9 players that are right there close to being a 4-star. So again, take that for what it's worth. You may not care about it, but that is the case. And also, they have quite a few players just outside the state of Arkansas that have been committed. I will say their highest ranked commit is Grayson Wilson from Conway, the quarterback. But you got Kamari Williams from Palm Beach Central. You got Blake Cherry from Owasso, Oklahoma. Of course, we just mentioned Caleb Bell from Georgia. Connor Howells from Florida. You have Jaden Shelton from Dallas. You got a kid from Terrell, a kid from Mobile, a kid from Atlanta, Texas. Yeah, that's the one that I like. Is the one that's Atlanta, but it's actually Atlanta, Texas. But also a player that was committed or ended up committing to Arkansas on top of that happened to be the teammate of Caleb Bell, and that is Jaquinton Madison. Kind of like a dual threat. Both defensive linemen. He's 6'2", 275 pounds. He's a mid-rated 3-star. But he did have some offers to some smaller schools, but ended up coming to Arkansas again, 6'2", 275 out of Alpharetta, Georgia as well. So that's kind of where it stands right now for Arkansas and the recruiting battles that they're going through here in 2025. And I always love looking at this because you're 32nd right now, okay? You're 32nd right now in the recruiting class for 2025. So what does that mean when it comes to the rest of the SEC? Well, here are the teams that have a better recruiting class, or at least a higher ranked recruiting class at this point in time than Arkansas. Alabama, Georgia, Auburn, Texas A&M, you got LSU, you got Texas. Remember, they're technically in the SEC now. You also have Ole Miss, Tennessee. You have South Carolina. You have Missouri. And then you have Arkansas. So right now, Arkansas is 11th. Crazy. Forgot Oklahoma, 12th. Got to remember them too. 12th in the SEC out of 16 teams. And you see that and you're like, oh, okay, big deal. Like, yeah, that doesn't matter if how low they're ranked in the recruiting class in the SEC. It's par for the course. Who cares where they're at? And, all of that stuff. I get that approach, and I get that a lot of you feel that way. But I want to throw in this little caveat because we're going to get to the ultimate question about if Arkansas will ever or can ever have a top 10 class in college football. Because at least from the beginning of whether it's Rivals, whether it's 24/7 Sports, any of these entities that's been keeping up with class rankings, Arkansas has yet to have a top 10 class. In fact, the highest one was actually in 2008 when the Razorbacks were able to finish, I believe, 16th that year in that class. Again, there was a lot of teams that were still ahead of them in the SEC, but still as good as it's got. But what I'm saying is that you with college football changing so much, with the transfer portal being so much more important, you don't get as much wrapped up into recruiting rankings as much as you do. But I've said this many times, and some of you understand it, some of you disagree. But I'm telling you, is there a difference between having a top 10 recruiting class and not having a top 10 recruiting class? Absolutely. I mean, you just look at the numbers, look at the results, look at the fact that pretty much every single team that wins a national championship, if not competing for a national championship, has top 10 recruiting classes pretty consistently. That's not just some sort of crazy trend that you're pulling out of the air. There's a reality to that. Just look at it. Science. If you get top 10 classes consistently, you're going to be at least in contention for a national championship. That's the correlation. But to me, I've always felt that 11 through 25, if you have a recruiting class ranked 11 through 25, there is marginal difference between those numbers. Like, if you have the number 13 overall recruiting class, it's not that different from the number 21 overall recruiting class, because you're starting to get into the point to where, those top 10 classes, they got multiple 5 stars, multiple high 4 stars. Like, they're set. But when you're talking about the difference between, the only reason that this team is ranked 13th and not 21 is because they had that one 5-star player, but this other team has a lot more higher 4-star ranked players, so they're a little bit lower. Like, you start looking into the science of it, there's not that big of a difference between them all. And if you look at the success that's come along with it, with those teams and how it's equated, I mean, it's pretty consistent that way. So I've always felt like for a place like Arkansas, you need to be into that range. You need to be into the range of 11 to 25 to feel good. Like, if you're outside the top 25, again, it's not the end of the world. It's not terrible, but it's not something you want to be in. Even if you're 25th, number 25, and you have 11 SEC teams in front of you, still, that you're in good shape. You're doing something right. That's about the expectation that Razorback fans have had and probably should have moving forward when it comes to recruiting. Now, given the circumstances of how things change, and when I say change, I'm talking about the NIL, because let's be honest, when it comes to recruiting, when it comes to transfer portal, when it comes to everything, the NIL is indeed a game changer. It is. So the question becomes is, with the NIL, will Arkansas ever have a top 10 recruiting class? Well, I'll answer that question here in just a second. But I'm going to tell you about our friends over at Hopper Termite and Pest. Because, folks, we know that in this day and age, you want to make sure that everything is taken care of in your home. You want to make sure that your home is protected from everything, not just from weather, not just from break-ins, anything like that. You want to make sure it's protected from pests and termites and all types of critters. Well, Hopper Termite Pest Control has you covered in this regard, because not only are they the best when it comes to being able to put forth a strategy and getting rid of all of those pests that are entering your home, but they do it in the way that it needs to be many weeks before it needs to be reapplied, and it also lasts through the rain. We're talking about spiders. We're talking about carpenter ants, centipedes, rodents, moles, mosquitoes, cockroaches, all of the above. Like, they will take care of it. So if you're having these issues, whether it's your residential home or even your business, give Hopper a call at 479-750-4070. That's 479-750-4070. You can also visit their website at callhopper.com. And when you do call them up, be sure to say Natty. Be sure to use that word, or to say that the guys from Natty State Sports sent you over. Because if you do that, you're going to get $50 off your first service. Simple as that. You're not going to get a better deal than that. And they want to take care of you and take care of everybody in the Northwest Arkansas, as well as the North Central Arkansas and even Northeast Arkansas as well. So check them out today. Again, it's the Termite Pest people there at Hopper, and you can call them today. It's 479-750-4070. Okay, so the question, will Arkansas ever have a top 10 recruiting class in football? Folks, if I had a nickel for every time I've been asked this question, or I personally have thought about this question, I'd be a naked man and rich. I can tell you that. But I just think that with recruiting overall, like, I'm looking at it from when I was younger and I really, really got into recruiting, and it was almost a ceremony. It was so fun. Maybe some of you didn't find it fun, but I found it fun whenever you're going out there and you're getting ready for signing day, that first Wednesday in February or whenever it is. And ESPNU had wall-to-wall coverage. They had all the players who put the hats on, and it was a very simple thing overall. It'd be kind of fun, maybe some cool little deals going on there. Maybe your team would flip a guy that you weren't expecting. Maybe there'd be some shock going on there too. But overall, it was just a day that was looked forward to. And because there really wasn't the transfer portal, and transfers weren't really a commonality, because even if they were, they had to sit out a year. And even then, if you wanted any sort of transfer to help out, it was the JUCO ranks, and JUCO didn't go towards recruiting rankings. You were just set on, like, all right, high school kids, high school kids, because not only are you going to get them, but the numbers show, or at least the percentages show, that they're going to stay at your school for a while until you can develop them, until they're ready and everything. Like, there was a system in place you kind of understood, and everybody understood. And every single year I kept looking at it for Arkansas, and it just never got to there. Again, the number 16 class, I believe, is the highest Arkansas ever had. Some people would be like, oh, they had the number 8 class in 2004. I was like, okay, well, there's no record of that. And maybe they did, but the point still stands. Like, that was about as high as you got. But most of the time you were between 20 to 30 in that range. Sometimes a little outside of the 30, maybe get lucky and jump up into the top 20. But overall, it was between the 20 and 30 range. And it would frustrate me so much. I'm like, man, why am I seeing these other teams that have no business, or that Arkansas is beating every year? Why are they having higher recruiting rankings? That does not make sense. And I kept trying to rack my brain around it and trying to figure out why this is happening. And eventually I got to the point to where I developed the conspiracy, like I think a lot of Razorback fans did, of, anytime a player commits to Arkansas, they automatically lower his ranking, because if he committed to Arkansas over Alabama or LSU or Georgia, it automatically means that they're not, that they think that they're not good. The recruiting outlets say, oh, he must not be very good if he's going to Arkansas. I bought into that conspiracy theory, and maybe there is not so much a conspiracy. Maybe there is some truth to that, but it would be frustrating to see how many players you'd get, how you'd be successful. You know, like in the Bobby Petrino era, you were beating pretty much everybody and doing it really well. But yet those teams that you were beating had always the higher recruiting classes. So I was like, there's got to be a conspiracy in there somewhere. But as time went on, I started kind of like looking inward, saying, all right, well, say if the conspiracy theory does not exist, say if it's not true, say if there's no possibility that it could actually be something like this. Let's look at this logically. Let's look at this in a legitimate way, okay? Why? Why would Arkansas, what's keeping them from that? Assuming that the rules and the playing field is all fair, what is keeping them from having one of the top recruiting classes in the country? Well, if you look at the years that Arkansas had the best recruiting classes, it was always years that the state of Arkansas produced a lot of high-level talent. I love the Natty State. I love Arkansas. I love Arkansas more than anything. It's it's the reason why I've never moved any other place, and there's no other place I'd rather be than right here. That's facts. So I'm not meaning this in an insulting way, but it's just the honest truth. Arkansas is not the type of state that is able to consistently put out high-level numbers of high school quality talent players. Like, there's years where it does happen, and there's been phenomenal players that have come from this state. I mean, Darren McFadden came from this state. Traylon Burks came from this state. Jamal Anderson came from this state. I mean, Sean Andrews came from this state. And, you know, the list goes on and on of great players that got drafted in the first round. Matt Jones, another one. Like, great players that got drafted high and were highly regarded from the state of Arkansas. So don't say that, don't come at me and say like, oh, well, what about these players? No, I'm talking about generally speaking in the numbers. In that 2008 class, the ones that I always keep referencing, the reason Arkansas's class was so high that year is, because I had a lot of good players. But if you look at the in-state talent, that was the year you had Jarius Wright, Joe Adams, Greg Childs, Chris Gregg, and Tyler Wilson, and Dennis Johnson, all from the state of Arkansas. All of them came from the state of Arkansas that year. And every single one of those players I just mentioned, it's not like who was that? Or what happened with them? And I don't remember. No. Every one of those players I mentioned not only just played, but were pivotal and crucial in the success of the Arkansas Razorback football teams those years under Bobby Petrino. Tyler Wilson was the quarterback in 2011. Mention the wide receivers. I mean, need I say more? Chris Gregg ended up being an all SEC caliber tight end. Dennis Johnson was a phenomenal running back and a kick returner. Joe Adams, of course, punt returner. Like all those guys contributed in a major way, and they all came from the same recruiting class. Well, that was the exception to the rule. The rule normally is for Arkansas is that you're just not going to have that type of class often. In fact, since that point in time, since that year in 2008, I can't remember a single time where you've really even been close to having something like that from the class, where not only all of them are really great players, but all of them commit to the University of Arkansas. That's another thing. And then they live up to the expectation, and in some cases, even like the Chris Greggs, exceed those expectations. Sometimes it happens that way. But for Arkansas, you're going to have a year where it just comes together, where it's just going to have elite talent coming from the state and you being able to get them to commit to Arkansas. That's the first thing. But for a while, that was the most important thing for Arkansas to get a high-level recruiting class, in my opinion. The most important thing was just timing, luck, coincidence. That was going to be the only way. But now with the NIL, that becomes the most important way and the most crucial way to get yourselves a top 10 class. You know, I think back to some of the other schools in the SEC and how they were able to get top 10 classes. Like the Ole Miss year with Hugh Freeze. Like everybody knows, he was cheating his hiney off. Like they were going nuts with it. And they were doing it by, committing violations out the wazoo. It was just crooked and corrupt, and anybody could see it because they did it with the subtlety of a baboon. Like they had the number one player out of Texas, number one player out of Illinois, number one player out of Georgia. I'm like, okay, you guys went 6-6 last year. You've been irrelevant since the SEC came together in 1992. The only player that's been worth a flip that you've had has been Eli Manning in that span, and yet now suddenly, boom, what happened? Oh man, we're just doing a good job in recruiting. They just love the Ole Miss Rebel way. No, there was a lot more to that. But when that happened, I was like, okay, there it is. If you're Arkansas and you're trying to figure out a way to where you can be one of those teams to get in the top class, you got to have the NIL to go along with it. And if you've listened to me or my show or my Locked On Razorbacks podcast or any of that, you'll know how I feel about the NIL program over at Arkansas. I know it's good. I know it's in great shape. I know that. Could it always be better? Of course. But is it the worst? No. Especially now in basketball, as you all can see. It's working out okay in that regard. But will somebody step up for football? One of these big-time businesses, will the Waltons, will the Hunts, will the Stevens, whoever, Jerry Jones, will any of them step up and help out with the NIL program to get elite-level football players to campus? Yes, I think that day is coming. But it's going to take the right coach. I don't know if Sam Pittman's that guy. I really don't. But what I do know is that anytime that you have a coach that you go far and above to bring in, and it ends up being like a mind-blowing, I'm not expecting a Cal hire, but somebody of note where everyone's like, okay, Arkansas just dropped their nuts and said, hey, we're doing this, and got some big-time hire. That's going to get people a lot more apt to be like, ooh, yeah, we want to win. This is our time. Okay, we got a great coach to do it. So how much you need? Let us know. We'll be over here. We'll send you a check. We'll Venmo you, whatever it takes. Excitement brews that. And if you have the right coach in place, there'll be people that are just lining up, trying to help out with that. But it's easier said than done, because let's also be very clear about something. Football is the number one moneymaker in all of college sports. It's not even close. Arkansas still, to this day, is one of the very, 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 very few schools that make revenue in their top three sports: football, basketball, baseball. There's a lot of schools that make money in football and basketball. And then there's quite a few schools that only make money in football. And because of that, people are going to flood the money in there because the money's going to come back out of it. Is it right? Is it the way that Arkansas should be? I mean, I'll leave that up to y'all and leave it up to your interpretation. But the point is that you have those types of opportunities. You have those types of things that could work out and really help out your program. But you're going to have to be able to have somebody in place that can grab and get that NIL and do something with it. Because the NIL, it doesn't matter how much you flood in, folks. If the NIL's there, but the coach is not, the culture's not, the handling of it is not, then none of it's going to matter. You see that all the time. You see it all the time where, you just like, oh, okay, well, just money's going to help. Well, look at the government. I mean, how many times have we seen things where the government has flooded millions of dollars into certain things and it does not get better? In some cases, it gets worse. But why? Money should solve everything. Well, not if you don't have the right people in place. Not if you have the right game plan. Not if you have the right execution. You can flood in money all day long, but if you have idiots running the asylum, you're screwed. You're not going to have anything. So that's what Arkansas is really going to have to make sure that they get into. That's the type of thing they're going to have to make sure that they handle well and handle it themselves. They have to, and I mean have to, have the right guy in place. I'm not just talking about head coach. I'm talking about coaches. I'm talking about administration. I'm talking about staffers. I'm talking about recruiting coordinators. the whole enchilada. They have to have those right people in place to be able to take what's given in the NIL and put it into practice and get the right kind of guys, get the right type of players. I also don't think it's as simple as just being, all right, let's go look at 24/7 Sports, right? Who's the top 10 players listed? Okay, 1, 2, 3, all right. Those 10, go out and get them. No, you got to make sure they're the right guys. Addressing needs, ones that fit your system, fit your philosophy. Some players, some 5 stars transcend that, but it takes a little bit more than that. So the ultimate question, going back to it, will Arkansas ever have a top 10 recruiting class in college football? And my answer to that is yes. Yes, they will. Will it be next year? Probably not. 5 years down the road? 10 years down the road? I mean, who's to even say what college football will look like at that point, the way that it's been changing so rapidly? So I don't have a date on it. You know, I don't have a way of looking into my crystal ball and saying, oh yeah, and then this year is when it'll happen. But I do believe it'll happen. And the reason being is because, folks, the NIL, if you hate it, that's fine. But the NIL is what can help a place like Arkansas more than anything. Arkansas can really benefit from NIL programming, from NIL help, because it is what it is. Essentially, is what I'm trying to say. Fayetteville is not the easiest place to get to, fly into, to visit. It's just not. It's something that people don't think about. It's not a city or an area that you travel through. You know, like, I'm pretty sure everybody's been through Memphis, you know, driving through it. I think everybody's been through Nashville, been through Atlanta, been through Dallas, Denver. I mean, you've been through a lot of those places. And the only real way that you've ever been through Northwest Arkansas is if you're going up to Kansas City from someplace. Or if you're, because like even on 40, you don't even go through it. Like, it's a tough place to get to. You have some limitations. You have some things that are going to be going against you. But as many coaches have said, Bobby Petrino said this when he was head coach. Even John Pelfrey said it when he was head coach. I think even Eric Musselman said it when he was head coach. All you have to do is get them on campus. Once you get them on campus, the rest can take care of itself. But it's about executing the way of getting them there. Because if they don't come here, if they don't check it out for themselves, they don't see it in person, they're going to keep on with this idea of like Arkansas, never been, never had reasons to go. Nothing that place is known for. Why would I go through like all of that? People will just keep with that stigma and that stereotype. But when you get them on campus and then they see what the campus is like, they see the facilities, they see the fan base, they see the student life. When they see all those things, it immediately puts up a green flag in their mind of saying, okay. Maybe I was wrong about this place. Maybe this is a place I can go to. Yeah, I mean, I got offers to all these different places, but this might be a place. And then you throw in some NIL. Yeah, definitely. This is definitely a place that I can check out and want to play football. But I'll go back to my original point. Will it happen? Yes. But if it's me as the head coach of Arkansas or the administration or the staff or whoever, and I got somebody walking up to me and be like, I got more money than Fort Knox to give you an NIL, I'll let you handle it. Like they're just saying, here's a black credit card that you can, no limit, just figure it out. Here you go. I'm not doing it in high school. I'm not going to 18-year-olds, 19 or 17-year-olds and saying, here's a bunch of money, come on. I'm using all of it in the transfer portal as much as humanly possible. Because even the players that you get out of high school, if they're not happy and after 1 year, they'll move on to somewhere else. Quinn Ewers is the greatest example of that. That guy made $1 million at Ohio State. Didn't play. Made $1 million, bounced out and went to Texas. Like, I don't hate him for it, but it's just transfer portal. Transfer portal is what will help you a lot quicker, building depth, easier to deal with, someone who's developed a little more under somebody else. You've seen what they've done. You've seen them establish themselves as a college football player. You've seen the type of player that they can be, and you're like, yeah, let's do that. Let's go with that guy. Let's make that happen. And the rest will take care of itself. So focus in on the transfer portal if you have the NIL. Arkansas, I'm telling you, football's they're going to have a turnaround sometime. Who knows? Maybe this year is kind of the start of it. I've always said that my theory when I've talked about Sam Pittman, this being his last year at Arkansas, I've always felt like, well, once they do that, then they'll go and they're going to bring in Barry Odom as head coach and keep Bobby Petrino on as OC, and then have Michael Schur as the DC, and then people will come in and flood the NIL. My wild conspiracy theory, like if I'm throwing out a scenario, that'll be the one. That'd be the one. I don't know if you'd be happy about that. I don't know if I would be happy about it. But I'd at least give it a shot. At least be a little bit interested in it. That's for sure. But hey, if talking about giving things a shot, how about BroThrow? You need to give BroThrow a shot. If you go to BroThrow.com/Natty, Natty, you'll see what all the fuss is about. It's a place where you can go and put up money and betting on sports against real people. We're not talking about the house. Like BroThrow is not the house. They're not getting any of the juice. You're going head to head, straight up against real people. And I know the sports world may have slowed down for a lot of you, but Major League Baseball is still going on. And a lot of you like to bet on baseball, as long as you're not Pete Rose. So if you go to BroThrow.com/Natty, you can get involved on some of the games that are going to be happening not only tonight, but tomorrow and the next few days even. So for instance, right now, you can go up against Mitchell's feeling the Mariners at plus 1.5 runs, as they're going to be taking on the Guardians. He's putting down $32 where you're like, hey, Guardians are going to take care of business in this one. I'm going up against you too. $32. Boom. Bam. And then whatever ends up happening, you settle up. It makes it easy with the Cash App or with Venmo to settle up, but you settle up and you save a ton of money in the juice. And it even has one of the cool things about it is it has a little deal there in the top left-hand corner that when you do make your bets, it shows you how much money you've saved in juice. It shows how much more money you're making by doing it through BroThrow rather than some other app or some other place. So check it out today. It's available in most states. It's free to join. And you must be 21 years or older to join, but it's BroThrow.com/Natty. Check it out today at BroThrow.com/Natty.
1, 2, 3, let's go!
All Natty, all the time. Powered by Arkansas, for Arkansas. The John Nabors Show is live from the Natty State Sports Studios.
All right, Razorback fans, a few things of note when it comes to Razorback Baseball and some awards that have been handed out, and we're going to talk more about that. It's brought to you by L. Jennings Law. Folks, as we know, there is a lot of fun to be had when it comes to baseball still, even Major League Baseball or college baseball, but just like in baseball, preparation is key, and at L. Jennings Law, they understand that more than anybody. It's all about that process. Processes on the field, off the field, and that's when they step in. With a proven process that covers every detail, they ensure that no aspect of your planning is overlooked. From drafting your last will to setting up a family trust, their team makes sure everything is in place. So trust the L. Jennings Law process and make an estate plan that protects your loved ones and gives you peace of mind. You can contact them today at 501-501-WILL. That's 501-501-9455. You can also visit their website at ljenningslaw.com. But no matter what it is, when it comes to trust, business planning, and elder law, do it with L. Jennings Law at 501-501-WILL. That's 501-501-9455. All right, so here was some good news that happened for the Razorback baseball team, and not necessarily surprising considering how great he is. Hagen Smith has been named College Baseball's Foundation National Pitcher of the Year. He is the second Arkansas pitcher to win the award, joining Kevin Kopps. And he's also the fifth pitcher from the Southeastern Conference and the third in the last 4 years from the league to win the award, which will be presented at the College Baseball's Foundation annual Night of Champions event date later to be announced. So a couple of things there. Like one, no surprise that Hagen Smith won Pitcher of the Year. And that was pretty impressive by him, and all things considered. But also the fact that I don't know. I was a little surprised to see that he's only the 5th pitcher from the SEC and the 3rd of the last 4 years. I guess I would have to, see how many times the award's been given out, but still pretty dominant for the SEC over the past few seasons. And Kevin Kopp's like, anytime a pitcher is going to win an award because of how great Kevin Kopps is, I'm like, okay, well, they're going to be the second one to win that from the pitching standpoint. And there it is. Like Kevin Kopps won every single award you possibly could. But again, it's a huge thing for him. And, he deserves it. And I know we've talked a lot about Hagen and the job that he's done and some of the things that he added in to what Arkansas was over the past 3 seasons. Like the fact that he stayed as healthy as he did was impressive. And the fact that he was able to accomplish so many great things as a true freshman and develop, like each year he got better. That's development, folks. And, there's a lot of things that go into that, but I have a hard time thinking about pitchers over the past 3 seasons, we'll say 2 to 3 seasons that either got worse or just didn't develop. Like if there's injuries involved, that's one thing, but guys that it seemed like everybody improved, or at least, if they, as long as they weren't injured, they maintained kind of the play that they had. And it's really going to be something that Hagen Smith, you look back upon him. It's just unfortunate. I hate to bring it up, but I have to. It's just unfortunate that these 2 pitchers that you've had win this award, how great they were, how great everything was surrounding them and everything, it didn't happen in Omaha. Like Andrew Benintendi is the only player of that magnitude that Arkansas has really had that went to Omaha. And honestly, we've talked about that with Tyler Spoon that year too. That was a team that didn't have all the talent in the world, but they were just gritty. And they had a guy named Benintendi who was really good. And he kind of carried the team on his back and was able to do a lot of things and make it happen. So that's been the only time. And that's what I really hope. Again, going to Omaha is one thing. And not discrediting what Arkansas has done in SEC play the past 4 or 5 years. Like that's been very impressive. But we all know that its results are about getting to Omaha, getting to the College World Series. It's a results-driven league, and that's what you got to do. And Arkansas has not done that consistently enough, at least to make people feel really good about it. But still, it's a thing to where I'm hoping that Arkansas can couple both things at once. And what I mean by that is having a phenom player like next level, award-winning, top of the top, big-time player, and mixing it with getting to Omaha and going far in it. I don't know if that goes hand in hand. I don't know if there's maybe some reason why that doesn't happen. But Jiminy, it sucks that all these awards and all these things that happen for someone like Hagen, who deserves them. It's just unfortunate that it's just now happening. And, seeing, it feels so long ago that the Razorback baseball season ended, because it did. And Omaha College World Series still going on. It's like, how much better, how much nicer, how much greater would it be if they were just still playing? But they're not. And so all these awards, not saying they're tainted, but it just kind of doesn't have the same, yay, excitement to it. It just doesn't. It just doesn't for me. Maybe I'm the only one in that regard, but it just doesn't for me. But either way, congratulations to him, though, for real. Like, it is a great honor, and he is worthy of it. He absolutely deserves it, and I love the fact that he was able to make that happen. But also in some baseball news too, got to keep adding this. Arkansas added a shortstop from the transfer portal, and I love this. His name is Maximus Martin. I mean, I'm not going to call him Max. Not happening. It's Maximus. Maximus Martin. It's a beautiful name. He's transferring to Arkansas after he spent his sophomore season with the Georgia State Panthers, according to 24/7 Sports. So they keep adding in guys into the mix. He had a batting average of .313 with 3 home runs, 22 RBIs, and 45 games where he started 44 of them. And he also had an on-base percentage of .439, 50 base hits, 32 walks while stealing 6 bases. He's from New Jersey, actually, so that's pretty cool. He spent his freshman year at Rutgers, where he appeared in 25 games with 14 starts and had an average of 203 with 4 home runs, 12 RBIs, and 12 runs scored. So he definitely made a jump and got to 313. And he's deciding to call Arkansas his next stop. So he actually played center fielder there, but looks like he's going to be coming in as a shortstop, which makes you wonder, well, hold on a second. I thought Eloy was shortstop. Well, as I've said many times, you can move guys around in the infield a lot easier. Like some are natural positions. Like look at Peyton Stovall, for instance. Peyton Stovall is a natural second baseman. But his freshman year, you had a guy named Robert Moore playing second base. You had a guy named Jalen Balls Battles playing shortstop. And then you had a guy named Caden Wallace playing third. So Stovall, you're like, oh, we need to play you. You are really good. We're going to put you at first because we need you on the field. And he played it, and he was great at it. And so once then Robert Moore went on, he moved over to second, and the rest was history. So the point is that you can have guys play different positions. Like just because Eloy's been the shortstop this past year and you're bringing in this guy who played shortstop this last year doesn't mean like, oh, crap, what are we going to do? One of you guys are going to be second string. No. What it means is that they're going to go out and they're going to figure out who's the best shortstop because of how important a position it is, and then have the other guy move around. And it's not even just for the infield. Sometimes it could be the outfield, because if you remember, Peyton Holt was playing in the infield. In fact, he started this past season because Peyton Stovall was hurt, playing second. And then he moved over to third, and then he ended up being in outfield, which he was great. So, they'll figure it out. They'll move it around and everything, but they're still getting into the transfer portal, which is what they need to do. They're always going to have a good high school class, no matter what. I mean, it's just the way it is. But I'm hoping and I'm praying that, I hate putting it this way, but it's true. I'm hoping that the early exit from postseason play, is what ends up helping them get a jump on the transfer portal. Because while these other teams are busy playing, which I'd rather be doing, 100% rather be doing, I'm trying to find silver linings here. While they're out preparing and all of that, I'm hoping Arkansas is like, all right, let's get a jump where we can have 100% focus on recruiting and transfer portal. Let's get after it. Let's do that. And they end up bringing in a lot of great players. Because there's a few transfers from the past couple of seasons that made a huge difference. I mean, Jalen Battles was awesome. I mean, that guy he's one of my favorite players ever. He was a transfer. Caleb Cali, I don't think got enough credit. Caleb Cali started off so rough, but that dude was a monster. He was a monster. And I think that if the team hadn't had so many dadgum injuries last season, then he would have been, they could have done a lot more from him. But he was a big, consistent guy at the end of the year. I think he ended up batting like 330, 340. And that's when that's after he started the season like 1 for 30. Like, I don't even know if that's a joke. I know it was really rough. So I'd love for them just to get that type of player. I know it's easier said than done, but just get a player like that, like a Zach Cox, like just somebody who's gets on base. Like whether it's a hit or walk-in, but just is great. It could just get on base, just constant feeling that. And a guy that's really smart, really patient, and has a lot in front of him. Just get one of those guys. And I'll be thrilled about it. But I'm also thrilled to tell you about our friends over at Alumni Hall. We know Alumni Hall is the ultimate Razorback shopping experience. And anytime that you're going to get your Razorback gear, that's the only place you need to go to. Because listen, you want clothes that fit you and your personality. Some people love wearing polos. Some people love wearing button-ups. Some people love wearing Hawaiian shirts. Some people love wearing jerseys. Some people just like flat-out t-shirts, right? Well, guess what? Alumni Hall has all of those things. It has everything that fits you. And it's not just for the men, for the women, for the kids. They have everything. Your style is going to be there at Alumni Hall. And they have all different assortments to choose from. They have all different types of clothing lines to choose from. And they have plenty in stock right now. So you got to go check them out, their location in Fayetteville. Or you can shop them online. If you go to nattystatesports.com/alumni hall, that's nattystatesports.com/alumni hall. You check them out that way. You'll be able to see all the great things that they have in their entire catalog and get it directly delivered to your door. It's as simple as that. So again, check them out today It's Alumni Hall at nattystatesports.com/alumni hall.
1, 2, 3, let's go!
All Natty, all the time. Powered by Arkansas, for Arkansas. The John Nabors Show is live from the Natty State Sports Studios.
All right, Razorback fans, we know that basketball is still on the mind of pretty much every Razorback fan. Football will be here before we know it, of course, but everybody still wants to know more about John Calipari, the Arkansas Razorbacks, the roster, and how everybody sees them this upcoming season. So we're going to talk about that, as well as a lot of other things, as we go ahead and welcome in a very special guest here on the John Nabors Show. It is our buddy Aaron Torres, Fox Sports Radio, as well as the Aaron Torres podcast, and he joins us from a different time zone. I think it's the Pacific time zone, but it's always good to catch up with you. AT, how's everything going this summer for you?
Everything's great, man. You know, last time we talked, Arkansas was at 7 players, but we knew the 8th. We were on DJ Wagner watch for about 2 weeks. Last time you and I spoke, we were on DJ Wagner watch in the midst of it. So yeah, got that commitment. You know, I don't know you guys who cover it daily. I was a little surprised by the TB, the Trevin Brazil stuff, but obviously a great pickup for Coach Cal. Now we're at 9. Think we're probably done, but I'll tell you this, man, loaded, very talented roster. And obviously, no, we're still months away, but excited to see what it looks like on the court.
Well, as much as I'd like to talk about, of course, Wagner, which I know that it's something that was, I wouldn't say it's inevitable, but everyone kind of knew that that was going to be the case. But specifically talking about Trevin Brazil, because it was a shock. Let's just be honest.
Okay,
I felt like he was for sure going to at least try his hand at the NBA, which he did. He did go to the combine and everything, so at least went through that. But then when he's in the portal, I'm like, okay, well, you know, he's just going to move on. But to return to Arkansas, what did you make of the move from his perspective coming back to play for Coach Cal, but also Coach Cal's perspective of adding a player to this already talented roster and a player that shows a lot of upside, but also needs a lot of work too?
Yeah, it's really interesting. You know, as I went on vacation in early June, but before I left, it was right around that NBA draft deadline. And I thought Trevin would probably just stay in the NBA draft. And my thought process was pretty simple, was he was so dynamic early in that 2022-2023 season. He gets hurt. He doesn't look like himself. And it's like, do you come back to college and risk not playing well again? Then you're just not a prospect. I mean, if you can still sell, hey, I'm a year removed from surgery and it's taking time, but I'm 6'10", I can jump out the gym, I can hit threes, whatever. So when he announced that he was deciding to return, I was a little bit surprised by that. And then admittedly, I was away, but did see the news when he announced that he was going to return. And I was stunned too. Now, what I think, you know, as I had time to think about it, the more that I think about it, I actually think from the Arkansas, I think it's more of a risk for Trevin Brazil than it is for Arkansas and John Calipari. I actually think it's almost like a zero downside, all upside decision from the John Calipari perspective. The reason I bring it up is that the front court, you got 2 really good players, and certainly, especially with Big Z, a very versatile player at the center position. And so now you're adding a third 7-footer that we have seen at his best was a double-figure scorer in major college basketball. As I just said, can jump out the gym, can hit the 3-point shot. And I think it's easy because of everything that happened last year, and I'm guilty of it too, of forgetting how dynamic this kid was back in early November and December of 2022 of that first year at Arkansas. I mean, him and Anthony Black were so dynamic in that pick and roll in Maui, all that good stuff. So I just bring it up to say, if you're John Calipari, the upside is if this kid clicks, this was a guy that we were talking about as a potential first rounder, maybe even a lottery pick when he was healthy. And then if there's the downside is, well, you got a 7-footer that can spell Jonas Adu, can spell Big Z, and oh, by the way, has SEC experience, SEC, you know, all the things that you need. And at the very least, you got another 7-foot body on your roster. So the more I thought about it, I love it from John Calipari's perspective and just curious to see how it all plays out on the court.
Well, that's the thing is like last year when Trevin Brazil, of course, was coming off of that injury, everyone saw how good he was before that happened in the 2023 season, I guess, or 2024 season. What get all my
22,
years mixed up, but they saw how good he was. And even going into last season, everyone felt like, okay, this is going to be like Trevin Brazil is going to be one of the best players on the team. I think he was preseason All SEC, second team. He was one of the players that went to SEC Media Days. Him and Devo were the two players selected for that. So there was a lot of expectation, and everyone was expecting him to be one of, if not the best player on the team. Now, with Cal and this whole roster, it's kind of weird because I'm not expecting him to be the best player on the team. If he is, that's great, and I'm not saying he doesn't have the potential, but where he fits in and ranks, and assuming he stays healthy, where does his athletic and talent ability match up with the rest of this roster that's already extremely talented for Cal?
I mean, I think the big loser in theory could be Big Z, because Trevin Brazile has shown everything that Big Z has shown, only he's done it. I don't know if you could say over a bigger sample size because he got hurt, but that would be the only downside. Is then all of a sudden you really got three guys. You know, I think Adu is going to be the starter at the 5. And maybe a Duthiero somewhere in there. There's a little bit of whatever. But yeah, I think that's the interesting part is what if he does come back and he's Trevin Brazile from 2022 into 2023 before injury? Now, all of a sudden, like I said, you got a potential first round pick. And these are good problems to have. And I think that's how Cal's looking at it, is he's seen him in person, last season. I don't know how. I would hope and assume that they've done their homework on what he was prior, and Ronnie Brewer's still on staff. A couple other guys from the previous staff are still there. Probably were going to bat for him in those meetings with Coach Cal. So yeah, I think that's the interesting part. Is again, the worst case scenario is you got a 7-foot body with 2 years of SEC. Well, really 3 years dating back to Missouri, and of course the upside is if it clicks. We're talking about a first-round type talent. So, again, what does that mean for Big Z? What does it mean for Jonas Adu? What does it mean for Duthiero? Those are conversations that we can have when we see 2022 Trevin Brazile. But like I said, I just think this is a real, essentially a zero downside play for John Calipari and this new staff.
I know it's so hard to forecast a lot of this because, they haven't even gotten through and started the season, preseason practices, anything like that. But looking at the roster that Cal has assembled, I talked a little bit about this on my show yesterday, so I want your opinion. Cal gets draft picks every year. I mean, sure. There's no doubt. Not in first-round picks. It just happens. It happens every single year. Looking at the roster right now, how many of these 9 players do you believe will be drafted in the first or second round, so the entire draft, in the NBA next season for Arkansas?
Wow. Put me on the spot. I think what's crazy is I think probably everybody except like Jonas Adu, Jonas Adu. I mean, he's 7 foot. I mean, I could see him being drafted. Billy Richmond's probably the only one that you sit there and say like, he's probably a definitive 2-3 year player. Now that doesn't mean that they're all going to be, but listen, I think Carter Knox has the size and skill where he's going to get a look for sure. Boogie Flan, kind of the same. We know the NBA draft, they like to skew younger. They bet on young talent as opposed to established guys. But I'll tell you, I'm not giving up on DJ Wagner. This was a guy that was averaging double figures as a freshman point guard prior to his injury and was playing really well. I still see an NBA player base. What I saw in a little bit of what we were talking about with TB is like, I still see a guy that, from the guy that I saw from early November, really July, because they played an exhibition event last offseason. From the guy from July all the way through about early to mid-January, that looks like an NBA player to me. Duthiero, I've said this publicly a million times. I don't know that I've ever seen a player improve more year over year in college basketball than Duthiero. That first year, he looked like a deer in headlights. He looked like, honestly, like a deer that was just walking for the first time, just kind of came out into the world, rubbing his eyes, just trying to figure things out in SEC play. And by the end of last year, by the start of last year, he's playing with confidence. We've all, even if you're an Arkansas fan that didn't watch much Kentucky, you're seeing the video highlights. You're seeing the confidence, the way he attacks the rim, the way he attacks the offensive glass. So I guess what I'm trying to say is of the 9 scholarship players, I think in theory you could see a world where 8 of them are probably draftable next year. Now, is that going to happen? Of course not. I don't think that's anywhere. I don't think we've ever seen anything close to that historically. So I would feel confident saying draft night 2025. I think you see 3 to 4 Arkansas Razorbacks at some point in that 2025 NBA draft.
We're speaking with Aaron Torres of the Aaron Torres podcast, as well as Fox Sports Radio here on the John Nabors Show. Now, Aaron, I usually really agree with a lot of your takes. You have a lot of great opinions on everything, but I'm going to talk to you about your trash top 25 list that you have preseason.
You're like Kansas State at 17, huh? I can tell.
The Razorbacks at number 12. Like, come on, dude. Like, what's going on here? Like, what are you seeing here? Because I see it's like, hey, is there a better top 9 in college basketball? You ask that question, and then I'm at number 12. Like, what gives? Razorback fans are expecting top 5 preseason type stuff here.
First of all, this is great for the brand because everybody says, oh, Torres, all you ever do is say nice things about Arkansas. So if I could get a few people mad at me about the ranking, I can point to this exact moment. Maybe we should just clip this off for, when Arkansas inevitably beats a top 5 team next year. And I do the big pig invasion thing. And then everybody's like, oh, Torres, you never say anything bad about Arkansas. Well, John Nabors on June 19th, 2024 told me that I had Arkansas way too low. Shame on me, and gave me a slap on the wrist. Listen, first of all, I'll say this is that I think because of the portal, all these really good teams can really reload in the offseason where it's like, you look at this, just think about what we just discussed is a Arkansas team that probably has 8 guys that if it breaks right for them can be drafted, and really probably 9 players that at some point, if it breaks right, are draftable prospects. And I have them outside the top 10, but I think that speaks to, even a UConn, they lose 4 starters, but they're able to add 2 high profile transfers that are really could be impact players. They add a 5-star late in the process. I mean, these are things that didn't happen even 4 or 5 years ago. I mean, I think about even Cal. I mean, he'd have his roster set, then he'd lose a guy at the last minute to the NBA, and you'd kind of hope there was a reclass kid that would maybe move up a year. Now it's just you go deep diving into the portal and you come out with somebody that you like. And so I bring that up to say that there's a lot of really good teams in college basketball this year. I mean, North Carolina's returning the ACC Player of the Year and 3 or 4 starters off a number 1 seed, as well as adding 2 McDonald's All-Americans. UConn, as I said, has largely reloaded with a core of 5 or 6 players that just won a national championship. Kansas brings back probably 3 of their 4 best players and then added 3 impact players in the portal. Alabama, what they've done this offseason speaks for itself. So Arkansas at number 12, it's funny because I actually think I was the first one that was willing to move them into that range. And now I see somebody like a John Rothstein, who I greatly respect, said something to the effect the other day of, they're a top 10 team in disguise. And so it's like, okay, I don't feel bad now. Not that I ever felt bad, but it's like, okay, you can't just call Torres an Arkansas homer because Rothstein sees it. I know some of these other top 25s. I don't look at all of them, but it feels like it's more of a consensus. Okay, this is probably a top 10 to 12 roster on paper. The only reasons I don't have them higher is because there's a lot of good teams ahead of them. Only 9 scholarship players. They're an injury away from potentially being in sort of big trouble. But I actually really, really do like this roster a lot. I do, because I think you have enough of everything where there isn't any one player that would be crippling if you lost him. But it's not so much, as we've discussed, you and I have talked about this nonstop, John, is the idea that I think by the end of last year, Cal had too many good players, and that's obviously not going to be an issue in his first year at Arkansas.
All right, well, you saved your bacon, no pun intended, for Arkansas fans here for a little bit at least. So we'll see.
No, yell at me. Tell me how dumb I am. I need, like I said, I need this for the brand, because everyone, Torres is too, he never says anything bad about Arkansas. It's like, no, I just kind of tell it like it is. Yeah. And as you said, John Calipari knows how to put together a basketball roster. And so forgive me because he landed, like 7 high profile transfers and McDonald's All-Americans. Forgive me. It's all my fault. I know. So yes,
I know. No, we're just going to have to chalk it up to that. But you did mention, since the last time we talked, the saga with Dan Hurley. Now I know that, back-to-back national champions. And I know, this being a UConn guy yourself, like, not only is it so hard to win 1 title, it's extremely difficult to win 2. It's dadgum near impossible to win back-to-back. but I don't even
in
think,
this era, especially.
Yeah, like, and I don't even think I've seen anything like it where it wasn't even close. Like there was no game that was close. The last team to beat UConn was Chris Jans in New Mexico State.
Crazy, right?
Yeah, like back over in Buffalo. I got to watch that game in person. But
that's right.
Like, what did you make of that whole thing with the Lakers connection, him staying at UConn? Do you think that it was all kind of a ploy? Was there actually legit interest in Dan Hurley wanting to go to LA? Just what do you make of that whole saga that went down?
Yeah, it's funny. I mentioned I went on vacation early June thinking what could possibly happen. I didn't really plan it with necessarily the NBA draft deadline, but I left after that. What could really happen? And then literally the last day of vacation, woke up, told my wife the night before, oh, this is the most relaxing vacation. I didn't even have my phone. I left my phone in the room. We're doing all sorts of fun stuff. And I wake up to, no lie, probably 30 or 40 texts of, oh, you're losing your guy, blah, 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 this and that. And so what I'll say is, I've said this on all my platforms. From the beginning, I kind of sniffed out what I thought it was, which was a leverage play on his part to get some stuff done at UConn. And I think it was probably a little bit of a leverage play on the Lakers' part as well, where they could at least now probably hire JJ Redick, who we know has a relationship with LeBron James, and they can say, well, we just we did everything we could to get Dan Hurley. Well, no, you didn't. You offered him a worse contract than Kentucky was about to offer him if Dan Hurley had actually sat down with him. But listen, I just looked at it from the actual basketball perspective. Listen, this is an unpopular take. I don't think the Lakers is a good job right now. I know this isn't an NBA podcast. I outside of Fox Sports Radio, I don't talk a ton of NBA, but LeBron James is 40 years old. I think it's easy to forget his last two coaches. The last coach that just got fired made the Western Conference Finals a year ago. And so, people say, oh, you don't turn down the Lakers. It's like, well, Dan Hurley has a pretty good thing going right now. And the last coach got fired a year after making the Western Conference Finals. And so I'm not saying that that UConn is a better job than the Lakers, but the Lakers at this moment in time with a 40-year-old star, he's still a star, but it's a younger man's league. Now you're probably going to have to draft his son. And Dan Hurley has been very vocal about what has led to his success at UConn. We recruit families, not just players. In other words, I don't want my parents showing up at practice asking, why my son isn't playing. Well, that's what you're going to have to deal with. And as I've said on my show, even if you just look at the basic facts of the reporting never even made sense. Woj is trying to sell us that Dan Hurley's been the favorite from the beginning, but they waited 5 weeks after they fired the last coach to talk to him. It didn't even make sense. And so I said I was never really worried. Ironically, and I've said this publicly, the only moment that I was really worried that he was leaving, it was crazy. It was the last 15 minutes when his wife showed up to the facility right before we knew he was making his decision. And everybody on social media was like, well, I mean, she's not going to show up if they're leaving. I'm like, that's literally the only reason she would show up. Like, no disrespect, she's got her own life. Does she show up to the facility on a normal Monday just to yuck it up? Like, I don't think so. She ain't getting on the whiteboard and drawing up out of bounds plays. So when I saw her walking in the facility, I was like, she would only show up if they're saying goodbye. And so that last 10 minutes, I freaked out. We get the second Woj bomb. And lastly, let me say this, is when Dan Hurley did his media tour last week, and by the way, I love it. I'm happy. I've said it a million times. I think there's probably an NBA future for him at some point if he wants to work in the NBA. But what I will also say is, like, because when he did the media tour and he said, anybody who says that I use this for leverage doesn't know what they're talking about. So I got a lot of those comments in my social media. And all I would really say to that is, one, I've never heard anybody use a job for leverage and then admit it after. It's like, no, that was the toughest decision I ever had to make, blah, 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 this and that. But then two, in the next sentence, he literally admitted it was for leverage. He literally said, hey, my contract's been done, but there's some stuff with NIL. There's some stuff with my coaching staff that I that needs to be ironed out. And so he admitted after that it was for leverage. And that's the whole Torres take on it. Obviously, I think the big overarching theme is I'm very happy he's back. And I will say, even as a UConn guy, I have the understanding that he is going to be coveted as long as he coaches. I have a feeling he's going to be coveted. I think again, if he wants to coach in the NBA, he's going to have, it might be a Jim Harbaugh situation where we're going through this every single offseason. And if that's the price you have to pay, he's earned that right to take all these calls. But I never believed that this one was the one for him.
Well, I know you're not saying that the UConn job's better than the Lakers. Like, I know people may like misconstrue it. However, I believe being a college basketball coach at a high level is better than being an NBA coach right now. I know that people can argue what's better or what's worse, but do you think again, not looking at specific teams and franchises because every situation is different, but generally speaking, do you believe that it is better as a coach to be a head coach of a college basketball team than an NBA team as far as your future, set up for success, and everything to go along with it?
Well, two things. One, first of all, I sort of agree with you on that. One, it's a star-driven league in the NBA, and especially LeBron. Like I said, the last coach made the Western Conference Finals, and then the coach before him won an NBA title and got run out of town 2 years later. So it's a tough business. You're at the whim of your players. But let me also say this, and this is something I'll give Dan Hurley credit for, is in the midst of that media tour, one of the things that he did say was, I hear a lot of complaining about being a college coach these days. And he said, this is a privilege to do this. And I know it's easy for him to say it now, but I think, John, we're starting to get to a place of correction where, I think the first 18 months to 2 years of the NIL world, of the unlimited transfer world, it was the wild, wild west. And I can understand why Nick Saban at 71 wants to retire. I can understand why Jay Wright says, I want nothing to do with this. Coach K. But it feels like there's also a lot of guys that are starting to figure it out. Kalen DeBoer, goes to Alabama. It seems like he knows what he's doing. Ryan Day's figuring it out. Dan Hurley's figuring it out. And it's not perfect. And I think it'll get better. But I think what everybody has done is just adjusted. The first year or so, it was chaos. Nobody really knew what was going on, what to expect, what's a rule, what's not, how to handle this, how to put together a collective, how much money do we need to raise, how do I handle my locker room? But I'll even give you a quick example. Dan Hurley actually said this during the season, and I thought it was interesting, was he talked about publicly, he said something to the effect of they were talking about a specific, kind of a younger player that wasn't playing. And he's like, I'm in those guys' ears every day telling them, trust the process. It's going to be okay. I believe in you. You're here for a reason. And why is he doing that? It's because he knows there's people on the other side of those kids saying, transfer, don't stay. They're going to recruit over you. And I use that as an example to say 5 years ago, you didn't really have to have those conversations with players. There was nowhere to go, whatever. And then every school from UConn on down got burned by losing a couple guys that they weren't expecting. And you adjust how you approach things. You adjust how you talk to kids. You adjust how you're preparing for the NIL surge in basketball in February and March. You're preparing for the NIL surge in December in football in October and November. So everybody's adjusting. The job is hard. But I think, one, to your point, being an NBA coach is hard too. But I think everybody's starting to figure out what this NIL portal world looks like. And I think it has been a little bit overstated how it's so terrible to get paid $8 million a year to coach football. What an awful it's no, it's got its challenges like everybody else, everywhere else. And you just adjust to those challenges as time goes on.
Well, last one before I let you get out of here, AT. I thought it was so cool with Jordan Walsh. He was part of the Boston Celtics, won the NBA Finals. And I always have rooted for the Celtics. I hate to say I'm a fan because I feel like that's almost like a bad thing to say about actual true fans. But how would you handle being a guy that went from being a high school senior to less than 2 years later winning an NBA title and having a ring on your finger? That's got to be an insane thing. He just turned 20 in March. I feel like that is such a crazy thing to try to put our minds around, for us or people like us going through that at such a young age.
So first of all, did they put them is there a kiddie table for the under 21 crowd when they pop the champagne? I don't know how that works, but
good point.
What's crazy is a couple things that pop to mind. One, first of all, and we've talked about this, and I think most Arkansas fans are appreciative of what Eric Musselman, has done for that university, for your university. I mean, it's the second time in 3 years an Arkansas Razorback that played under Eric Musselman is an NBA champion. If you go back to Moses Moody a few years ago as well. And, we talked about this last time, or maybe we talked about it on my show, John, but there probably is no John Calipari without Eric Musselman. And that, speaks with Jordan Walsh. I think what's also interesting about Jordan Walsh, which I was thinking about, and I know you remember this, and I know Hog fans remember this, is there was like a real debate. And I think he was one of the last guys last year at the deadline to really make the decision, okay, I'm 2 feet in. And there was like a real conversation about Jordan Walsh might come back, might this, might that. And so, listen, I don't know, one, what his financial situation was. Would it have been better? Would there have been more NIL to come back, less NIL, whatever? And we certainly don't know what his future holds. But that ring, that's something that he can take with him to the grave. So congrats to him. But it is crazy. 20 years old, 1 year removed from college, a year removed from a time when guys like you and I were having the debate of like, maybe he's actually coming back for a sophomore year. And here he is now as an NBA champion.
Yeah. And by the way, not to correct you, but you can't forget Bobby Portis also winning a national NBA title.
No doubt. So what is that? 3 and 4 years?
3 and 4 years. Ain't too shabby. Ain't too shabby.
I don't know the last time a Husky has won. So there you go. So everyone's talking about UConn this, UConn that. The Hogs are the best of both worlds, I guess.
Yeah, I feel like Bobby Portis was probably the only one that was a real contributor, but hey,
sure.
Listen, they got the ring. That's all that matters. They got the ring on their finger. That's all that matters. So.
Sounds like my wife. No, I'm kidding. No, in all seriousness, it is cool. And I did a little bit forget about Bobby Portis, and it speaks to and I don't want to discredit what Mike Anderson did because obviously Bobby Portis, Pat Bev, all that, but then also again, 2 and 3 years from that short window that Coach Muss was there. It's impressive. And obviously a lot of those guys, whether it's an Anthony Black, whatever, their best days of basketball are ahead.
It is Aaron Torres of the Aaron Torres podcast, as well as Fox Sports Radio. As always, AT, appreciate you joining us, talking a little hoops. Can't wait for the season to get started. And I'm sure we'll be catching up with you later in the summer, but enjoy the rest of your summer, my man. We'll be seeing you. All right.
Yes, sir. I'm sure I will be reconnecting with this show, but as always, appreciate you having me. We will talk soon, sir. Thank you.
1, 2, 3, let's go!
All Natty, all the time. Powered by Arkansas, for Arkansas. The John Nabors Show is live from the Natty State